Hi, everyone. Welcome to Potentials. And today we have Amber, and she's going to be talking. We're going to be talking about, both of us, talking about timeline shifts. And so I have a bunch of questions for Amber today. We've already been chatting for a while, and it's always interesting to talk to you because you've got so much to say. You're just, I just love talking to you. So anyway, let's get started. Um, okay. Amber, what does the term timeline shift mean to you personally? Is it subtle, quantum, or emotional?
So, in my experience, and they are experiential. In my experience, timeline shifts, for the most part, can be quite physical. Um, I will see, like sometimes there will be subtle changes, and sometimes there are extreme changes where it's just like, whoa, this is completely different from what I saw like 2 seconds ago.
Can you give an
Um,
example of that? What was that like?
so the biggest example, and for the sake of for the sake of being scientific,
Mm,
I have epilepsy, and usually when people have epilepsy, when you have seizures, it's normally it's pretty normal. You just have a seizure, you have a recovery time, a typical, electrical storm in your brain, you have a recovery
mm.
time, and you go like once you finally recover, then you go about your day and nothing has changed. Well, for me, my seizures are not like that. Um, mine, my seizures, sometimes I'll have a warning, sometimes I won't. And the strange thing is that there are multiple different types of seizures. You'll have small ones where it just kind of looks like you're kind of staring off into space. There are other ones where you might do like a little weird twitch, or there might be there, and then there's other ones where you might be like, it might look like you're talking to yourself.
Hmm.
I've even heard, I mean, a lot of times they have to do like seizure training and with people like police, because sometimes a seizure can actually, like, a person will like act out violently, but they have literally no control over themselves.
Yes. Yes.
So so in that case, it's like it's not only dangerous for the people around them, but it's also dangerous for themselves, because I mean, I think it's really rare for it to happen to a female that has epilepsy. It happens more often with males who have
Yeah.
epilepsy. So they have to train police officers and FBI agents to be like, hey, just to let you know, sometimes seizures are like, they literally look like violent outbursts.
Sure.
So be prepared, like, try not to discriminate is basically what they try to teach. And
Right.
be, then of course the person's going to recover and they're going to be like, what just happened, and be all confused.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so and and then there's the classic, they used to be called grand mal seizures. They're now called tonic clonic. And
Huh.
those are the ones where the person literally just falls to the floor and starts shaking, their eyes roll to the back of their head, and all that stuff. Believe it or not, those are the seizures I have, and they're actually the only kind of seizure I have.
Wow. Wow.
They're the, so the and I never used to have them. So, long story short, I had brain surgery when I was 7 years old. I had what's called an AVM, so Alpha Victor Michael. It was in my brain, right behind the right side of my. It was right behind my right ear. It
Right.
was it was pretty big. It was basically about that big.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I was 7 years old, I just passed out one day, got emergency life flight on in a helicopter, flown to the emergency children's hospital, and they found out that they found that AVM inside my brain, and they just went through emergency surgery and had that removed. I had a 1 month recovery, and so um, after all of that, I was basically totally fine, no issues whatsoever for 21 years.
Wow.
So after that surgery when I was 7 years old, for 21 years, I had no problems at
That's
all.
fun.
No neurological issues, no seizures, nothing. I was
Right.
fine. And then all of a sudden, when I was 28 years old, I suddenly had my very first seizure in October 2016. That date is very important, and that's where we get into timeline shifts.
Ah.
And this happens to me every single time. I've never had a seizure where I did not have a timeline shift.
Hmm.
And
Interesting.
so my first seizure, it was witnessed by my ex-husband. He, called the ambulance, had the ambulance come and pick me up, and I don't remember much the ride there, but I do remember arriving at the ER at the hospital from the ambulance, and I remember them taking me off of the ambulance, and they start asking questions like, what's my name, what's my date of birth, what's the year, who's the president, stuff like that. Well, everything was going smoothly until they asked who the president was. Now, remember,
Oh,
this is October
of 2016.
2016.
Right.
This was exactly 1 month before the election.
Mm-hmm.
1 month before the election.
Right.
And so they go through me, they go through the whole battery of questions to make sure I'm still, make sure I'm thinking properly again. And once they get to who's the president, I said Trump.
Yeah.
And like I said, this is October, so this is 1 month before the election. And
Right.
the
Right.
and the reason I knew I had made a mistake was because they first of all, the hospital staff was actually offended. And
Oh my gosh,
and
people are so silly. Okay.
I know. And they were like, the election hasn't happened yet. And I was like, oh, well, in that case, it's Obama. So apparently, during my seizure,
uh,
I had time slipped or time shifted 1 month
ahead.
ahead. So I saw the future and I was able to predict the
You're right.
the
Outcome.
election of
The outcome
Trump
of the
in 2016. So that was
Wow.
my
That's
and
wild.
and and that's like if I could go back and maybe look at like some journals, or maybe go back and interview that hospital staff and ask them if they remember me,
Hmm.
that would be like absolute 100% proof that I literally, like, I predicted the election
Well, the thing
of,
is,
of
people could say, "Oh, well, you wanted him to win," but I don't think that was the case because I know you, and it has nothing to do with you wanting anybody to win. It was just that you literally saw ahead.
I
It
saw it.
wasn't like wishful thinking or I'm projecting this. It was like
No,
you
it was,
just saw ahead, and it was
yeah,
you had no, you know, dogs in the fight, skin in the game, whatever they say.
right.
It was just a
It
feeling.
was,
Yeah,
well, it
it,
wasn't even just a
it
feeling. It
wasn't
was
just a
like
feeling. It was
yeah,
you
like
saw it.
I would, yeah, I said it as a matter of fact. I was like, I
Right.
was saying, I was like, it was literally, it was,
Like,
I
what's your
had no,
favorite ice cream
yeah,
or whatever? Yeah, like, yeah,
right, right.
right.
It was, that's what was coming out of my mouth. I was like literally
That's
stating a
smart.
fact, what, as I knew it.
Yes, right.
And so like that would be like if I can go back and talk to the hospital staff and be like, "Hey, do you remember me? Do you remember when you asked me these questions?" And
Yeah.
that would be awesome. And then
Yes.
it would be proof that like basically, yeah, I totally time slipped and I saw 1 month into the future.
So was that the first time that you realized you had the ability to consciously shift timelines? Or was it before? Did you ever have an experience before that?
That was the first time, but I it never really occurred to me though. Like when that happened, it
At
didn't
that
really.
time? Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
When it happened, I was just like, okay, well that's weird. Why would I know that a month a month before it happened? But it didn't really cross my mind at the time. But I
Right.
did but I did notice that something was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There was
Right.
something
Something
happened
was
that
off.
changed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something was off, right? That's interesting. So, do you feel like our current collective timeline is being influenced more by fear or awakening or both?
Um, I wouldn't necessarily say, well, I would say both.
Yeah,
Um,
me too.
I would say both. Definitely the awakening. It's at this point we're like in a full-fledged because of people becoming more awake and like people awakening. We are in a full-fledged time war right now
Yes.
because of that.
I was just going to ask now, what do you think the most recent timeline shift was? I personally feel like it was very recent and that it was like we almost had a World War III, but then we didn't.
Yes, it was actually my most recent seizure, actually.
And that was the same day, right? Was that the same day that
Uh, po
that we almost went to war? Almost.
Possibly. It was pretty recent. It was about a month ago. It was May 29th.
Okay, so that was a little bit before. A
It
little
was a
bit
little
before.
bit before, which I'm not surprised because like so for that one and again like this is what happens when I have seizures. Like this is like I get so so this time so I had this seizure and this time like I'm alone and I'm in my room and of course I find myself on the floor and I have like since this was the first time I had a seizure alone. And I had no clue how like I found myself on the floor. I had no clue how long I was out. So I was like, I should probably call the ambulance. And I was told like my brain was all scrambled, which that's normal. That's what usually happens after a seizure. So I was very confused.
Right.
So I call an ambulance. They come to pick me up, and of course, you know, I'm on like my room is on the second floor of this house, so I'm kind of like after a seizure, I'm kind of wobbling down the stairs.
Right.
So trying like holding the walls and making sure I don't fall down the stairs. Um, so the ambulance picked me up and the emergency responders pick me up, and they start running through those same questions, like what's your name, what's your date of birth, what year is it, who's the president, blah blah blah. I
Hmm.
answer I answer everything correctly, but this time I get one of again I get one of the questions wrong, but it was a different question.
Which one was it?
This time it was the year. When they
Oh,
when they asked me what year it was, the first thing I had to stop myself because I almost blurted out 2037.
wow.
It was literally like it was like
Wow.
again, it was like that's where my mind was at. Like my brain was like I was in that year.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I almost blurted it out, almost as if it was a fact. And then I wait, and then I stopped myself, and I look in the ambulance, and this is not 20 this is not a 2037 ambulance.
What made you realize that it was 2025?
Because it was all low tech.
But I mean, like of all the years, it could have been 2027 or it could have been 2024. Why did you remember it was 2025 specifically? Specifically.
I had to think about it for a minute.
It's
I did.
like
I did, because
wheels
like what
turning.
right. I have to think about it for a minute, and I was like, I'm looking like, so I didn't answer them immediately, but like that year, 2037, I almost blurted out. But
Yeah,
then
because
I
that's
but then
what you remember.
that but then I stopped myself, and I was like, hold on a minute. And
Do
I
you
was like,
think that you're time traveling when you're having a seizure? Do you think that that, that you're traveling in time in that moment and that you actually go to that time that you thought you were in at the moment when you came back?
that has to be the case, because like just the fact that like when I get those questions asked of me by the emergency responders,
Yeah,
when I give the answers, like it is like whatever answer I give, I state it as a fact. That's like it is
right.
something that is known to me,
That's so interesting. I wonder.
even if
So
even if it's wrong.
I wish that you could remember what you saw when you were in that year. Like if you could somehow connect to it again and be like, this is what I experienced while I was in that year. But it could be another timeline. You know what I mean? Because even when you
Yeah,
travel forward into other times, it might not be your timeline that the one that you're going to end up in because they're always shifting, and that's the point. Was there a defining moment in your life? Oh well, that was it. That was all. You already answered a lot of these questions. Um, so in your case, when you shifted timelines, it's usually because you've had a seizure. Have you ever felt like you shifted timelines without a seizure?
there was there was one time, um not really it wasn't necessarily a timeline shift, but it was more of, I suddenly accessed memories. um so not necessarily a timeline shift, but I was suddenly able to, and it was I
Access
didn't have.
memories of another lifetime or another
Yes,
timeline that you were in?
completely different completely different life, like
Okay.
a past life.
Okay.
um and this one's a little bit difficult to talk about, because
Mm.
it was I was going through a really rough time in my life. I had This was like last year.
Mm.
And I had just gotten fired from my job. Um and it was pretty traumatic because I mean, they had already lied to me about the job in the first place, and I was doing the best that I could. I was working really, really hard and studying really, really hard to make it work. And then I just got burnt out. And I was just kind of done trying to do what they lied about. So, in my attempt to try to pick up the pieces, or at least I tried to get a different job. And in that process, they just decided to fire me before I got the chance to get a new job. So that was pretty traumatic. So that night, I just after the getting fired and having to pack my stuff in my box and take my office stuff back home. That night I basically just had like a total breakdown, like a
Mhm.
complete nervous breakdown. I thought, at the time, I thought I just lost touch with reality. But what was really happening was I was so traumatized about what happened about getting fired that somehow that break allowed me to access memories from a past life. And I basically just collapsed on the floor, and I just started crying and saying, I miss my starship. I miss my family. And
Mm.
we're all, and I said, I mean, I was crying, I was distressed, and I was all blubbery and everything. So I was saying, I miss my starship, I miss my family, and we're all aliens and angels.
Mhm.
I said both. I said we're all aliens and angels.
Mhm. Yes, that's.
And I just remember while I'm saying this in my deep, because I was very distressed. I was in a lot of grief. I was feeling like a
Yeah.
ton of a ton of grief and a ton of loss.
Yes.
And in all of that, I was having actual visual memories of being inside of a ship and being surrounded by, and there were a wide variety of ETs. There were angels, and when I say angels, I mean there were actual people with wings.
Celestials. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And they were all aboard the ship, and I somehow knew that this ship was mine,
Mm.
and everyone on this ship was my crew.
Mm.
So
Now,
it wasn't necessarily a time slip or a
right.
time shift, but I was accessing that
So
past
you
life
were
memory.
remembering a past life of you being on a ship, which isn't even, it's not like you remember yourself being on another planet because you weren't. You were on a ship that was
Yeah,
traveling through the galaxy, I'm guessing,
yeah,
or maybe another galaxy, um, even then different than ours. There are multiple galaxies. So, um, and also are multiple universes. People think this is the only universe, but there are multiple universes as well. So
oh yeah,
it's gonna it's a lot to think about if you aren't used to thinking about it.
for
um,
sure, for
yes,
sure.
I don't want to go too far, but for anybody who's just getting into this, but let's see what. Oh yes, well this would be helpful, I think. What are your favorite tools or practices when you want to shift to a higher timeline? And how do emotions like grief or joy act as portals or anchors within timelines? And can someone get stuck on a timeline they didn't consciously choose and how do they get out? I know that's a lot to ask all those at once.
Yeah, that is a
Sorry.
lot. One of them I kind of already did answer in
Yeah,
grief, and that was the grief and loss can definitely it in my experience from what I told you, well, from what I
yes,
said before, that having that grief and loss can access past life memories, apparently.
right. And anchor that timeline. Now, what about how to get to a higher timeline that you would prefer to be in? Do you have
Well,
any
well, let me
experience with that?
Well, let me answer one of the other questions first. And
Okay.
it was, can you get stuck in a timeline that
Yes.
you didn't choose? And the answer
Yes.
is yes.
Yes.
It's happened to me.
Yes.
In fact, I've been like it happened at my with my first seizure.
Mm,
I shifted after my first seizure, I shifted into a different timeline and I got stuck there. And I've been stuck here for
yes.
about 9 years ish.
Ah,
So it's been rough. I know, like, I was not supposed to be in this timeline.
right.
And I knew it. I knew it. And the reason I knew was because just real quick for our listeners, I was already on the path. I was taking all of the steps, doing everything that I was supposed to do to become an astronaut,
Mm,
specifically the pilot astronaut.
yeah.
I was taking all of those steps. Like, I was getting my degree. I was starting with my bachelor's degree. I was even like, I was doing like physical training. Like, I was by myself. Like, I was doing my own physical training to
You were
make sure.
motivated. Yeah, you were
Yeah.
motivated. Yeah.
So and then I was gonna start pilot training as well on top of that.
Hmm.
So I was already on my way. I was going through school. I was about to start pilot training. I was doing physical training to be prepared to be the pilot astronaut.
Right.
And when that seizure happened, it completely shifted me to a completely different timeline, and I was not able to get back. Um, I'm still trying to figure out how to get back to that original timeline. There might be a way. It might take a little bit of finagling, but to answer your original question about how to get to a higher timeline, or to get back to a timeline that you left, that you want to get back to, um, you may not be able to get back to the original timeline that you got shifted out of. And usually when that happens, um, it's not always, I mean, sometimes it's a choice that you made. Like, sometimes, like, maybe you made a stupid mistake that, like, you just kind of screwed yourself over. But most of the time, it's because of someone else, usually. It was a choice that someone else made
Hmm.
that shifted you out of your timeline and into a different one that kind of made your life.
Now, when you say someone else, what do you mean by someone else?
Well, it depends. It could be, something as simple as like a friend
Okay.
or a family member,
So somebody
or
with an influence in your life is what you're saying. Somebody who's influencing
right,
your
right.
life.
Someone like in your circle of influence, whether it's
Okay.
a family member, it could be like a boss, it could be like a pastor at your church, who knows?
Right.
So that someone like that, it could be a choice that they made that would force you into a different timeline, one that you probably don't want to be in, and if I had to guess.
But if you have
So
free will, wouldn't you if we have free will, wouldn't you be still able to choose not to do what they want for you?
It depends.
Yeah,
Because
that's
sometimes
a good question. That's
it
that's a good
depends
question because
because
I always look at it as though we're not really the ones, like this 3D me isn't the one really running this show. It's my higher self that's really playing me like a video game almost.
well, it's not just
My
that because
avatar.
yeah, it's not just that because there there are certain choices that can start a chain reaction
Yeah, I
with
see what you
with
mean.
with other things, other people. It could
Yeah,
involve it can involve animals as well.
kind of like a domino effect.
Yes. Yes, a
I get it.
domino effect.
I get
So
what you're
like
saying. Yeah.
so once that starts, you might be able to start it in the middle maybe. You might
Right.
if you're fast enough, you might be able to
Yeah.
stop it, but like once it starts, it's really really hard to stop.
It's like being in a tsunami. Yeah, I feel
Yeah,
you.
so to answer your question, can you shift into a higher timeline? Yes. But it's really difficult and it often involves I hate to say this, but sometimes it involves making extreme decisions.
Yes. Oh yeah, I agree with that
Um,
because I've had to do that a lot in my life. I've
yeah,
shifted a lot of timelines and
yeah,
I've had to make very extreme decisions. I've moved around a lot. I've never, I wouldn't, I don't have what you would call a stable, steady life. You know, I've had to make a lot of choices on the fly like that because I could see if I keep going in this trajectory, I'm going to end up over there and I want to move over here. So I'm going to have to move this, you know what I mean? So you do have
exactly.
to do that a lot when you're
Yep.
shifting timelines. It could be a split second decision too that can
It
shift.
can. It
Yeah.
can. So you gotta I mean you gotta make you got it's gotta be calculated.
Yeah.
You gotta be calculating with it and you gotta be tactical about it.
Tactical is
Try
a
to
very good word. Tactical is a
yeah,
good word. Yep.
like try to think like try to be quick about it. Like, you know, be real quick about your
Use your
decision when
gut instinct. It's really what it is. It's your instinct, it's your intuition. It's
yeah,
not about always planning everything. Like you, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with planning things because sometimes you still do need to plan things to
yeah,
shift, but sometimes it really is about what is this the right decision and you got to go with your gut and not with,
yes,
oh, I'm going to mess up somebody's life, which is a shame.
right,
But
right.
sometimes it will kind of, make somebody not happy, but you can't live your life like that.
Yes. And like which is why I said most of the time if you want to shift out of a bad timeline and into a higher, better timeline for yourself, you're gonna have to make an extreme decision.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to make an extreme decision and it probably will make people unhappy or it's gonna make
It might.
someone
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I've had to do that and it's not fun, but at the same time, it's like once you do it, then like start once you do it, once you make that extreme decision and you go with your gut, then then the right pieces start falling into the right places.
Right. And it actually ends up where that person that you made unhappy might end up actually being happier in the long run anyway. Not saying that that's why you do it, but sometimes it just works out that way,
Right,
you know?
right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. So that's how you would get yourself out of a bad timeline and into a better one.
right.
But like I
That,
said, you gotta be tactical about it and you gotta go with your gut, like you said.
yes. Now, the star family and quantum allies, how do Jora and Jor-El assist you in aligning with better timelines? And have you ever felt like they shifted you without words, just through energy or presence?
Um, they've been they've been giving hints here and there. Um, not a lot of people actually know, the story about my star family. But like those two, um, they're privy to information that I am not.
Yes.
So because of that, because they have access to that information, they can give me hints and you know, kind of nudge me this way or nudge me another way, or say something like, you're on the right track, keep going.
Right. Yes. Because they have a different
So,
perspective.
mhm, yeah.
It's almost like looking at something from the air, and you can look down and you can see, oh, if you keep going that way, there's like a puddle and you're going to walk right through it. And they can see it, but you can't because it's further down the road. You know what I mean? It's kind of like that thing, like that.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
so, as long as I listen, I mean, and I've probably tested them probably more than they've wanted me to.
Yeah.
Just because it's my personality, I'm a little defiant. So, I
I
might,
hear you.
I might do something that they didn't particularly think was a wise decision, and then I would kind of learn my lesson. I'll suffer the consequences and be like, okay, yeah, you were right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thankfully, the my defiance hasn't gotten me like in like a really deep puddle. Usually it's just like, just a little shallow puddle, and
Right.
I can easily get out of it and dry myself off, and it's not a big deal. So,
That's good. That's good. I
and
feel
then
like they would try to help you if it was going to be something major, like tragic. They would probably be a lot more insistent that no, 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 you don't. You got to go this way. You
oh
know.
yeah, oh
Yeah.
yeah. So far I haven't run into that problem. I haven't like they haven't felt it necessary for me to they haven't felt it necessary to insist that I do X
Yeah.
instead of Y. Um, which I think in a way, it just because they're family, we kind of think a lot alike.
Yes.
So they can kind of trust me in that, even though I'm defiant, they can trust me in this sense where it's like there are some things where I'm like, yeah, I shouldn't go this way. And
Yeah.
they're like, yeah. So, yeah.
Um, what role do our small choices play in the collective shift? Does changing your routine affect the whole grid? And how do we hold compassion for those who aren't ready to jump timelines yet?
Um, well, it depends on what it is. Um, I can say something that it sounds small, but is actually a really big deal is holding certain beliefs.
Yes, that's what that question was about. It was kind of a little veiled, but you picked up on it.
Yes. Holding certain beliefs. It's really, really small, and you think it's not a big deal, but it really does affect people. And
Yes.
if you hold on to a belief and you hold on to it like, like you're literally white knuckling it, kind of like you're speeding down the on the highway and you're white knuckling the steering wheel. If you're holding on to a belief like that, it can really, really affect people around you in a negative way. It can be
Yeah.
really, really, it can be really hurtful. and it could actually, like, I hate to say it, but it's true. It could actually ruin other people's lives.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's really it's best to like look at your beliefs and say, okay, how does my belief affect, this other person, my neighbor, or
Right.
my kid that I'm trying to raise, or how does it affect my friend who's going through a hard time or whatever.
Hmm.
So just like really, really think about it. I mean, and beliefs is probably like a really big hurdle to try to climb over. So
Strongly held beliefs are
yeah,
like
strongly, yeah.
really, they're kind of like the nemesis of our existence.
Yeah, yeah. And
Oh,
and my
yeah.
my advice my advice to someone like that is to basically would be just try to think of the like just think really, really hard of what kind of consequences your belief system can cause for another person.
Yeah.
Especially someone who, you may think they're not innocent. I mean, you don't, I mean, do you really know? Like, do you really know that they're, not innocent or guilty?
Right.
Like,
Putting
do you
yourself
really,
in another person's place, you know,
yeah,
like
it's like, do you really
just
have any solid proof that that this person, person A or B is a is guilty, I mean, like,
yeah.
guilty, and guilty of what? Like, who have they harmed?
Mm.
That's, those are the kinds of things that you
Right.
need to like ask
Yeah.
yourself. Like, is person A really guilty? Like what are they guilty of? Who's the victim? Who have they
Hmm.
harmed? Or am I, because of this belief that I'm holding about person A, am I the one who's guilty? Am I actually harming person A because of this belief that I'm holding about them? That's the kind of stuff that we need to like
Yeah.
ask ourselves those questions.
Good. Good point. Good point. Okay. So, we're getting down to the end here. What role do, oh wait, no, we already did that one. If you could send a telepathic love bump to your younger self on a denser timeline, what would you say? And what is your vision for the highest potential collective timeline? And how do we begin aligning with it today? So those are really deep questions.
Yeah, I'll start with the first one. A telepathic message that I would send myself to a denser timeline.
Like a love bump.
Yeah, I would basically, my message would probably be something along the lines of put your guard up.
Hmm.
Not everyone is your friend.
Interesting. Okay.
That's basically is what I like. That's what I would say. It's like
Yeah.
put your guard up. Not everyone is your friend. It's not, it's not necessarily something that I would perf I wish everyone was my friend. That would be
Yeah.
wonderful. That would be
Yeah.
wonderful. But, putting too much trust in people, in too many people, can
Mm.
really hurt. And it has hurt me. So it's like,
Yeah.
be a little bit more guarded.
Yeah.
And so what were the other questions?
The other question was, sorry, just one more. This is the last one. What is your vision for the highest potential collective timeline for like everybody, for the whole world, universe, whatever? And how can we begin aligning with it today?
Oh man, deep.
That's the that's the biggest question for everyone, really. Hmm.
Mine would be the, that everyone's sovereignty would be restored.
Ah, yes. That is beautiful. I love that. I
Everyone,
will,
not just certain people, not just
everyone.
certain groups. Yeah,
Yes.
everyone's
I
sovereignty gets restored.
I'm with you on that one. Yes. I will
And
bump that up.
and the way to at least from what I have seen so far, and it's not fun, granted, but it has to be done. The way to get to that timeline is that you gotta have that defiance.
Yeah. Yes. You have to
You
stand
kind
up
of,
for yourself because
yeah,
if you want to be sovereign, you can't just declare yourself sovereign. You have to walk in sovereignty every day with every
yeah,
choice and decision that you make.
yeah. Sometimes you just gotta say no, and
Exactly.
and just don't do it. Whenever
And don't do
somebody
it.
try whenever somebody tries to force something onto you or manipulate you to do or coerce you, just
Yes.
no, I'm
Or
not
scare
doing
you,
it.
or even scare
Yeah,
you into it,
yeah,
which is what I think a lot of people, what happens with most people is they're just, what if I don't do it? That's the biggest fear. What if I don't? Because if I don't, then this and this and this, will happen. And that's the fear.
yeah, yeah. And in my experience, because like I've recently had to say no to some people, and I mean, okay, yeah, it's painful, but
And
once
scary
you,
sometimes.
yeah, it's scary
Yeah.
sometimes, but like,
Because you
but
don't
once,
know, because it's that uncertainty that you had. You had
yeah,
a lot of uncertainty. And that's the scary part. Right.
that is the scary part. The uncertainty is the scary part, but it's also freeing. And oh man,
Yes.
when you feel that
It's
freedom, it's
so
like, it's
so
like,
liberating.
dude,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, dude, I can breathe.
Yes. You can breathe, you can enjoy life again. You could
Yeah,
do things that you weren't able to do before. Um, yeah, it's like a whole new life. Yeah. And
yeah,
that's what shifting timelines feels like. It feels like a whole new life.
it
So,
does, and it is, and it's kind of like you don't really realize until you see it. Like, you just make that snap decision and you're like, no, I'm not going to do it, or I'm going to do this instead.
mhm.
And the change is, it's a huge change. It's not just a little change, it's huge.
Well, let
But
me tell
but
you, I
it's,
just want to say I'm really, really proud of you for what you making this change and making the choices that you had to make that were hard to do. And also for being open enough to share it with everyone and tell people, you know, give them some hope, I guess, is what I'm saying. Not hopium, but hope. And
like, hope in this
it's gonna
sense,
happen.
yeah, it's hope in the sense of like, okay, I gotta put my big girl or big boy boots on
Hmm.
and get to work. you,
Yes.
you, you
And
don't you don't just sit around and just let things happen to you. You just like, all
yeah,
right, strap on those boots. Let's get to
yes.
work. Yeah.
And sometimes you got to be a rebel, which is, I'm a little rebel and I'm proud
Yeah.
of it.
Oh, me too. I'm
So you
totally
got
a
to be,
rebel.
sometimes you got to be a rebel. I just, I'm an Aquarius and we're rebels. And we love it. We love to be
I mean,
different and be the pioneers and be a rebel and just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of what you don't know. I think that's the fear of the unknown is really the thing. with a lot of people, and I've been there too. I know what that's like. It's a scary thing because you're just kind of like jumping out of a plane. That's what it feels like
Yes.
sometimes.
Yes. I mean, that's technically what you're doing. You are jumping out of a plane, but remember, you have a parachute.
Yes, you do have a parachute. It's that moment before it opens is what it feels like sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, thank you for coming on and for sharing everything with us again. It's always a pleasure to have you on. And we'll have you on Potentials again. Everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing this hour and a half. I don't know how long we've been talking, but for sharing this chat with us. And I hope that it was helpful in some way, and that it encouraged you, and that you found some kind of strength to do what you need to do out of listening to this, and that your next timeline will be a much happier, better timeline, not just for you, but for the entire collective and for everyone that exists. So I know that's asking a lot, but but I always go for broke. So again, thanks everyone, and thanks for watching Potentials. See you next time. Ciao for now.